I want you to imagine something that sounds wonderful at first. You wake up one morning and you are suddenly wealthy. Maybe one of your investments went up far more than you ever thought possible. Maybe a side project turned into a real business. Maybe you received a large inheritance. Maybe you won the lottery. Maybe it was not luck at all, but a result that arrived after years of small, quiet decisions that nobody saw. Most people think the problem begins before the money arrives. They think the hard part is getting rich. But what I have seen again and again in markets, in families, in organizations, and in life is that sudden wealth is not only a financial event, it is a psychological event, it is a social event, it is a test of your principles. And if you do not have principles before the money arrives, the money will expose that weakness very quickly. A person who suddenly becomes wealthy often thinks, I have solved the problem. In reality, they have created a new set of problems they have never trained for. Money does not only increase your freedom, it increases the number of people who want something from you, it increases the number of bad decisions available to you. It increases the size of your mistakes. It increases the speed at which your character, your relationships, and your habits are revealed. That is why, if you suddenly become rich, the most important thing you can do is not celebrate loudly. The most important thing you can do is be quiet. I know that sounds simple, it is not. Human beings are wired to signal success. We want recognition. We want our enemies to know they were wrong. We want our friends to know we finally made it. We want to buy something visible so the world can see the new version of us. But wealth that is announced becomes wealth that is hunted. The moment people know you have money, the world around you changes. Some people will become kinder than they were before. Some will become needier. Some will become angry that you have more than they do. Some will begin calculating how your wealth can solve their problems. Some will decide that because you received the money quickly or because they did not see the years behind it, you do not fully deserve it. This is where many people make their first fatal mistake. They tell everyone they become publicly rich before they become internally prepared to be rich. There is an old story about Jack Whittaker, who won hundreds of millions of dollars in the Powerball lottery in 2002. At that time, it was the largest jackpot ever won by a single ticket. He was not a hidden winner. He became known. He gave money to strangers. He gave money to churches. He bought cars and houses for people around him from the outside. That can look generous. And generosity is good when it is governed by principles. But generosity without boundaries is not generosity. It is disorder. It creates dependency. It attracts predators. It changes the incentive structure around you. It can turn love into expectation, friendship into entitlement, and family into a claims court. Whittaker later said that being too generous destroyed his fortune and his family. His marriage broke apart. His relationships deteriorated. His granddaughter, whom he loved and spoiled with money, died tragically from an overdose. That is not just a story about one lottery winner. It is a case study in what happens when money enters a life before the life has a system to handle it. When people say money changes people, I think the deeper truth is that money reveals people. It reveals the giver. It reveals the taker. It reveals who had discipline. It reveals who had resentment. It reveals who loved you and who loved access to you. It reveals whether your identity was built on principles or on approval. That is why the first principle is privacy. You should become what people sometimes call stealth rich. That means you do not need to lie. You do not need to pretend to be poor. You simply do not broadcast your financial position. You do not make sudden visible changes that create questions. You do not explain every move you make. You do not turn your private balance sheet into a public story. If people do not need to know, they should not know. The one person you should speak with early is a competent attorney, particularly one who understands trusts and estate planning. Not because lawyers are magic, but because systems matter. A trust can create privacy. It can help with estate planning. It can help with estate planning. It can help reduce chaos if something happens. It can create rules around how assets are held, transferred, protected, and eventually passed on. A good attorney can help you design the structure before emotion and pressure force bad decisions. Most people wait until there is a problem. The better approach is to build the structure before the problem appears. That is true in investing. It is true in business. It is true in life. The time to build a bridge is before the flood. Once the privacy structure is in place, the next danger is boredom. A lot of people say that if you suddenly become wealthy, you should not quit your job. I do not agree with that in a simplistic way. If your job is meaningless to you, if it drains you, if you only show up because you need the paycheck, then sudden wealth gives you the right to leave that specific job. But it does not give you the right to stop being useful. There is a very big difference between quitting a job and quitting work. Work is not only a way to get paid. Work is a structure. It gives your days rhythm. It gives your mind a problem to solve. It keeps your identity attached to contribution rather than consumption. It keeps you from sitting around all day asking how to spend the money when people stop working entirely. Especially right after a windfall, they often move from production to consumption. Their daily question changes from, "What am I building?" to, "What can I buy?" That is a dangerous question to ask every morning. If you suddenly have money and no purpose, your mind will often invent expensive problems. You may start a business you do not understand. You may buy a restaurant because you enjoy eating at restaurants. You may invest in a friend's idea because it sounds exciting and because you are bored. You may confuse activity with purpose and spending with identity. Being rich and bored is one of the most dangerous positions a person can be in. The healthier principle is this: if the job you have does not satisfy you, leave it carefully, but replace it with work that has meaning, structure, and learning. It could be a different job, it could be a project, it could be a business you actually understand. It could be philanthropy with discipline, it could be teaching, building, mentoring, studying, or managing your assets with seriousness. But do not create a vacuum. A vacuum gets filled by impulse. For at least 6 months after sudden wealth arrives, I would try to keep life as normal as possible. Do not rush to buy the house. Do not rush to upgrade every visible part of your life. Do not rush to become the person you imagine rich people are supposed to be. You need time for your nervous system to adapt to the new reality. You need time to observe who changes around you. You need time to build your advisory team. You need time to separate freedom from fantasy. A person who cannot sit still with money usually cannot keep it. Then comes debt. When people suddenly get rich, they often think debts are no longer important. They say, "I could pay it off whenever I want, so why worry about it?" That is a mistake. Debt is not only a number, it is a claim on your future. It is a pressure point. It is a leak in the system. And if the debt has a high interest rate, it is one of the clearest problems to solve. First, credit card debt is usually the most obvious example. If a debt costs you 20% or 30% per year, paying it off is like earning that return without market risk. You do not need to speculate. You do not need to forecast. You simply remove a guaranteed drag. Personal loans and car loans also need to be examined. If the interest rate is high, the decision is usually clear. Remove it, simplify the system, reduce the number of claims against you. Mortgages are different. If you have a very low fixed mortgage rate, paying it off immediately may not be the best decision. If your mortgage costs 2% or 3% and your capital can earn more elsewhere over time, then the mortgage may be cheap long-term financing. That does not mean you should always keep it. It means the decision should be made rationally, not emotionally. Many people pay off the house right away because it feels safe. Feeling safe and being optimized are not always the same thing. The principle is to distinguish between toxic debt and useful debt. Toxic debt drains you at a high rate and gives you little productive value. Useful debt, when used carefully, can preserve liquidity and support better long-term allocation. But if you are not experienced, start by removing the obvious dangers. High interest debt goes first. It is a reset button. Once you have cleared it, make a rule with yourself that you will never go back into that cycle again. Then you have to deal with the people around you. This is where sudden wealth becomes hardest. The numbers are easier than the relationships. When you become rich quickly, the people closest to you may begin to feel that they have a claim on your money. They may not say it directly. They may not even be fully conscious of it, but in their mind, if you did not earn the money in a way they respect, or if the money arrives suddenly, they may believe it should be shared. Then come the loans. A cousin needs help. A friend has a business idea. A sibling is in a temporary emergency. A parent thinks you should help the whole family. Someone says, "You have so much now. This is nothing to you." That sentence is poison because the issue is not whether the amount is small relative to your net worth. The issue is what the request does to the relationship. Once you become the source of money, you stop being only a person, you become a solution. And once people begin relating to you as a solution, they often stop taking responsibility for their own systems. The fastest way to lose friends and family is often to lend them money. A loan creates a hidden hierarchy. You become the creditor. They become the debtor. Every conversation carries that imbalance. If they cannot repay, they avoid you. If you ask for repayment, you become the villain. If you forgive the loan, others hear about it and come next. So I would not make family loans a habit. If you want to help someone and the need is real, then give the money as a gift, not as a loan, and make it clear that it is one time. Do not expect repayment. Do not attach your emotional life to whether they pay you back, and do not become their emergency fund. This may sound harsh. It is not. Boundaries are not cruelty. Boundaries are a way of preserving love from the distortions of money. If you want to help people, create a system, decide in advance how much you are willing to give each year, decide what kinds of needs you will support, decide what you will not support, decide that you will not finance repeated irresponsibility when you help without boundaries. You often weaken the person you think you are helping. When you help with principles, you preserve both the person and the relationship after privacy, work, debt, and family boundaries. You reach the most important financial principle of sudden wealth. Never spend the principal. Spend only the income the principal can sustainably produce. Most people who receive a large amount of money still have a consumer mindset. They see a large balance and think, what can I buy? A wealth builder sees the same balance and thinks, what income can this machine produce without destroying itself? That difference determines everything. If you cut down the tree to make firewood, you get heat for a while. If you protect the tree, it keeps producing fruit. A family in the Source story won the lottery and bought a very expensive house, sports cars, and a private school lifestyle. For a short period, it looked like the dream. Then the pressure arrived, the cars were sold. The child was taken out of private school. The house was listed for far less after bad improvements, and debt created a collapse. That happened because they confused a pile of money with a system of wealth. A pile can be spent, a system can produce. The rule that matters is what I call a freedom figure. You need to know how much annual income you want your assets to produce. Then multiply that number by 25. That gives you a rough capital target based on a 4% withdrawal rate. If you want $200,000 a year in income, the rough number is $5 million. The idea is not that the future is guaranteed. It is not. Markets move. Inflation changes. Taxes matter. Your spending changes. Life happens. But the rule gives you a map. It forces you to think in terms of sustainable income rather than emotional spending. If you have $5 million and you try to live on $200,000 a year, you are thinking like a steward. If you have $5 million and you immediately buy things that create taxes, maintenance, insurance, social pressure, and lifestyle inflation, you are thinking like a consumer with a temporary pile. This principle applies even if you have not suddenly become wealthy. Your freedom figure is not only for lottery winners or people with inheritances. It is a target. It tells you what you are really building toward. It turns the abstract dream of freedom into a number. And once freedom has a number, you can design a plan. Then you need to think about where the money goes. At this point, the objective changes. When you have very little capital, you often need growth. When you have a large amount of capital, you need a balance between preservation, income growth, and liquidity. The mistake is to keep thinking like you are poor after you become rich, or to start thinking like a gambler because the numbers got bigger. A person with $5 million does not need to double it quickly. They need to avoid losing it stupidly. A simple example can make this clear. If I had $5 million and I were thinking about preservation first, I would not put everything into one asset. I would diversify because the future is uncertain. Diversification is not about knowing what will happen. It is about admitting that you do not know and building a system that can survive multiple outcomes. One portion could go into a low-cost total stock market index fund that gives you participation in long-term business growth. You are not betting on one company. You are owning a broad basket of businesses over long periods. Broad equity markets have historically created wealth, but they can also fall sharply. So this is the growth engine, not the whole machine. Another portion could go into a broad bond fund or other high-quality fixed income. Bonds are not exciting. That is the point. Their role is stability, income, and ballast. They may not protect you in every environment, but in a balanced system, they can reduce the probability that you are forced to sell your growth assets during bad markets. Another portion could go into real estate. Residential real estate can provide appreciation and practical value. Commercial real estate, when bought well, can provide cash flow, but real estate is not magic. It has leverage, maintenance, vacancy, taxes, management, and cycles. It must be underwritten carefully. If you buy it emotionally because you feel rich, it can become a trap. If you buy it based on cash flow, location, debt structure, and realistic expenses, it can become a durable part of the system. A smaller portion could go into higher risk assets such as major crypto assets. This is where discipline matters. Something like Bitcoin or Ethereum has had periods of extraordinary performance. But it is volatile, it can fall fast, it can test your psychology if you include it. It should be sized so that it can help you if it works and not destroy you if it fails. Another portion could remain in cash or high-interest savings. Cash is not a great long-term asset if inflation erodes purchasing power. But cash gives you optionality, it gives you sleep. It gives you the ability to handle emergencies without selling good assets at bad prices. It gives you time to think, and when you are newly wealthy, time to think may be one of the most valuable assets you have. The exact percentages are less important than the principle. You are building a machine with different parts: growth, stability, cash flow, liquidity, optionality, protection against your own bad behavior. That last one may be the most important. Most portfolios fail not because the market is unknowable, but because the owner becomes impulsive. They panic when prices fall. They chase when prices rise. They listen to the loudest person. They confuse a story with a strategy. When you suddenly become wealthy, you must build a system that protects you from yourself. That means you do not make large decisions quickly. You do not invest in something because your friend said it is guaranteed. You do not buy assets you cannot explain. You do not put money into businesses you do not understand. You do not let boredom become your investment advisor. You do not let ego become your spending plan. The example portfolio in the original idea produced a large amount of potential annual income if markets behaved like their long-term averages. But I want you to understand the word if is where risk lives. Past returns do not guarantee future returns. Bond returns can change. Stock returns can fall. Real estate can disappoint. Crypto can collapse. Cash yields can decline. Taxes can reduce income. Inflation can change what income means. That does not make planning useless. It makes humility necessary. A good plan is not a fantasy that assumes everything goes right. A good plan is a system that can keep functioning when some things go wrong. This is how I think about wealth. It is not about having the most impressive number. It is about having a system that gives you freedom without fragility. It is about having money that can support your life without controlling your behavior. It is about understanding that capital is not something you show off. It is something you steward. There is also a place for fun money. If you suddenly receive a large sum, I do not think you need to live like a monk. That would be unrealistic and unnecessary. Money should improve your life. It should reduce stress. It should allow you to enjoy some things. It should let you create memories and experiences. But fun money must be separated from the wealth machine. If you mix your fun money with your principal, your emotions will keep rating the engine that is supposed to fund your future. So decide in advance what portion can be spent freely. Maybe it is 5%, maybe it is 10%. The number depends on the size of the windfall, your age, your obligations, and your goals. But the principle is that you carve it out once, enjoy it without guilt, and then protect the rest. The mistake is not spending. The mistake is letting spending become identity. A wealthy person who stays wealthy does not buy every object that proves they are rich. They buy back their time. They buy the ability to say no. They buy the ability to work on what matters. They buy calm. They buy independence from people and systems that once controlled them. That is real wealth. Real wealth is waking up and deciding how to spend your day, not because you are lazy, because you are free. That freedom is fragile if you do not build around it correctly. Sudden wealth brings three forces toward you at once: your own impulses, other people's demands, the market's uncertainty. If you do not have principles, those forces will make decisions for you. If you do have principles, the money becomes a tool rather than a master. So let me put the full sequence together. Stay private. Do not turn your good fortune into public information. Build legal structure. Speak with a competent attorney. Understand trusts, estate planning, and privacy. Do not stop being useful. Leave a bad job if you should, but keep working on something meaningful. Keep life normal long enough for your mind to adjust. Eliminate high-interest debt. Be thoughtful with low-cost debt. Do not lend casually to friends and family. Give intentionally if you choose to help, and set boundaries. Never spend the principal. Build a machine that produces income. Calculate your freedom figure. Know the number that supports the life you want. Diversify the wealth machine across assets that serve different functions. Keep liquidity. It protects you from panic. Keep a separate pool for enjoyment, but do not let enjoyment eat the engine. And above all, understand that sudden wealth does not remove the need for discipline. It increases it, because when the numbers get bigger, the mistakes get bigger too. The person who gets rich and tells everyone is not thinking in systems. The person who gets rich and quits all purpose is not thinking in systems. The person who becomes the family bank is not thinking in systems. The person who spends principal as if it is income is not thinking in systems. The person who builds privacy, structure, income, boundaries, and purpose is thinking in systems. That is the difference between getting money and becoming wealthy. Getting money can happen in a day. Becoming wealthy is what happens after you decide how to behave with it. And that is why the best advice for sudden wealth is not flashy. It is not exciting. It is quiet. Tell almost no one. Do almost nothing quickly. Build the structure, protect the principal, let the income support the life. Use the freedom to become more of who you are, not less. Because the goal is not to look rich. The goal is to be free, stay free, and make sure the money that arrived in your life becomes a permanent source of independence rather than a temporary accident that disappears because you were not ready for it.